Hello, guys, and welcome back to Azza Sports. And today I'm going to be having a look at the upcoming round four fixtures and giving my tips and predictions and a little bit of chat about the games and yeah, just having some fun. Um, so yeah, before we get into the video, again, make sure to like and subscribe. And I have a new goal. So I'd like to try to reach 50 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you guys could make that possible, that would be really appreciated. So let's see if we can hit 50 subscribers by the end of the month. So see how we go. But anyway, make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. Okay. So the first game of round four, we have the Parramatta Eels taking on the Panthers at Combank Stadium. I mean, poor old Parramatta, they just can't catch a break at the moment. And they're playing now a Penrith side who are coming off the bye, so they're going to be very fresh. Um, I mean, they are still given good odds here to 282. Panthers 144. I mean, Panthers obviously clear favourites. But yeah, let's have a look through the sides here. So Clint Gutherson still at the back, Sevo and Simonson on the wings, Penasini and Blake in the centres, Dylan Brown, Mitch Moses in the halves, Campbell Gillard and Junior Barlow in the front row with Josh Hodgson dummy half, Bryce Cartwright second row still, and Ryan Madison is finally back after his 3 game suspension. So good to see him finally back there for them. And then Jermaine Hopgood still at lock. Matt Dury's on the bench with Brandon Hands. He's making his debut. Looks like he's coming on for Jack Murchie, who's out. And then Remy Gregg and Makisi Makatora on the bench. And Jacob Arthur rounds out the 17 as the 18th man. He's a replacement. Um, yeah, I mean, for Parramatta, like personally, obviously, it's the big in is Ryan Madison. He's back from his suspension, um, which yeah, he's gonna have to play pretty well to repay them from that whole suspension drama that happened after the grand final against the Panthers, ironically, where he got that crusher tackle on Dylan Edwards in the grand final, but he refused to pay his fine. So he just took a 3 game suspension. But yeah, anyway, it's going to be good to see him back there for Parramatta. And he bolsters their second row pairing, who have been a bit weak the starting 3 weeks. But personally, as I mentioned last week, I think Parramatta's biggest weakness has been their bench. Like their bench does not look that threatening at all. Like if you compare Parramatta's bench here to Penrith's bench, like they've got Scott Sorensen, Spencer Leniu, who's probably the best bench forward in the game. And they've also got Jamin Salmon, who's pretty solid. Scott Sorensen's more than solid. And they've got Sonny Luke, who's a very good dummy half. And Parramatta's bench is just full of inexperienced front rowers. So, yeah, I think that's what's let Parramatta down in these first 3 weeks. Some of their big signings like uh, Marade Niokora and guys like that, even Nathan Brown, who they've just let go. I don't know why. He could have bolstered their bench, but yeah, they've let him go to the Roosters. Um, so yeah, I think that's really been the only big difference. I think Parramatta's bench just hasn't been strong enough. I reckon their bench was slightly stronger. I reckon they would probably be 3-3. I really do, because they've only lost all 3 of their games by 4 points. So they're not that far out of those games, but yeah, they're just not there at the moment. But Ryan Madison coming back will definitely bolster their side, no doubt about that. But yeah, poor old Parramatta, they just can't get a break at the moment. Now on to Penrith. Like as I said, they're just coming off the bye, so they're all pretty fresh. Um, but the week before they got the job done against Souths at home. Um, so they kind of got a real bit of a roll on coming. So let's see if they can continue it. So their squad is Dylan Edwards at the back, Senia Taruva and Brian To'o on the wings, Isaac Tungo and Stephen Crichton in the centres, Jerome Luai, Nathan Cleary in the halves, pretty unchanged backline. Um, Moses Leota and James Fisher Harris in the front row with Mitch Kenny at dummy half still, so he's still going to be starting for them. So it looks like Sonny Luke will be coming on later in the game. I mean, I can understand that because he's still inexperienced, but yeah, personally, I would be starting Sonny Luke, but yeah, I guess Penrith know what they're doing there, so I'm not gonna say that's a bad thing for them. Um, and second row, they have Luke Garner and Liam Martin, and lock is Isaiah Yeo. Their bench is Sonny Luke, Scott Sorensen, Spencer Leniu, and Jamin Salmon, and their reserve is Matt Eisenhuth. So again, pretty much an unchanged Penrith lineup that won in round two. I mean, they got back to the way they were last year. That's why they won in round two. Obviously, had to buy last week, so they're going to be very fresh. I mean, again, this is a really tough game to call because Parramatta are gonna. I know they're saying in the media that they're not desperate, but they would be. Like they're down on the bottom of the ladder. They're in the bottom two with the Tigers, on no competition points, and they're coming up against Penrith, who they played in the grand final, and who they lost to. So Parramatta need to win because next week, as I mentioned last week, they play the Roosters next week, and the Roosters have the bye this week. So it's a very tough for the Eels. But yeah, if they don't win either of these next two games, I reckon their top eight chances are really going to be hurt of making the top eight or even pushing for a title or a top four or anything like that. So they need to win one of these next two games because they can't go 0 on 5. They really can't. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a tough game. I mean, they're at Combank. They seem to play really well at Combank. They seem like a different side at Combank. Whereas Penrith, oh, like I know they haven't started the year as crash hot as they were last year. I mean, obviously with the loss of Appy, Coruscant, Viliami kick out, it's taking a little bit of time to get there. But they've in round two, they sort of got back to the way they were last year. They played a lot better. They weren't as clunky in attack. So I think they're just going to go strength to strength. So for that reason, I'm going to tip Panthers, and I'm going to say Penrith are going to win 1-12. I still think this is going to be a very close game. But again, as I said last week, if the Parramatta didn't win last week, I wasn't going to tip them for the next 2 weeks because Panthers are just too strong of an outfit. They're coming fresh off a bye, so they're going to be more amped and ready to go, more energy. Whereas Parramatta have had 3 tough games in a row. Um, Against, well, genuinely top eight teams there in the Sharks, Melbourne, and the Manly Sea Eagles. And now they've got last year's or the back to back premiers and their rivals. So Eels will definitely be up for this game. That's why I'm saying Panthers 1-12 because this is a rivalry and it is going to be very close. But again, I would not be surprised if Parramatta pull this out of the bag. But I think Panthers are just going to be a little bit too strong. They're going to be more fresh coming off the bye and they're going to be a bit more energetic and they're going to get the job done. But yeah, very, very tough game there for Parramatta to get Penrith off the bye. But I think Parramatta will be in the game for majority of the game. But I think Penrith will just be a little bit too strong for them. Now, the next game, we have the Melbourne Storm taking on the West Tigers on the first Friday night game at 6 o'clock down there at Amy Park. I mean, obviously Melbourne Storm are going to be favourites here because of their name and reputation that they still have, although they are definitely not the team they once were. Up against the West Tigers, who showed some good fight at the end of their game last week against the Doggies. They showed some good fight, so that will bring them some confidence into this game. But as I've said many times, it's still tough going down to Melbourne and getting a win, no matter how bad Melbourne are. But anyway, let's have a look at the sides here. So we have Nick Amini at the back here. Still at the back. Will Warbrick and Xavier Coates still on the wings. Remus Smith and Justin Olam in the centers. And we have Cameron Munster, who is back at 5'8", as well as Jerome Hughes, who's still in the halves there. That's a massive back for the Storm. Cameron Munster, they have missed him so much the last 2 weeks. Just a lack of direction they've had the last 2 weeks. And they've had a lot of errors. And yeah, they've just really missed him. You can tell the difference between that round one Storm team and the last 2 weeks of the Storm. You really can. Um, but yeah, that's a big back in for the Melbourne Storm team. And we've got Tui Kamakameka in the front row with Christian Welch, and Harry Grant is at dummy half. With Trent Lorio and Elise Katoa in the second row, who Elise Katoa has been great for them these last 2 weeks. He really has been. He's probably been their best player on the field the last couple of weeks, included with Harry Grant and Nick Meaney. I think them three have been the Storm's best the last few weeks. The rest have been pretty ordinary. Um, and at lock, they have Josh King. On the bench, they have Tyron Wishart, Alec McDonald, Tarek Sims, Bronson Garlick, and Tom Eisenhuth is the replacement player. Yeah, I mean, Cameron Munster being back for Melbourne, that's a massive inclusion. So Jordan Grant is the only out. Um, yeah, I mean, that's massive. Um, I mean, going back to Melbourne, I think it's going to be good for the Storm to get back to Melbourne. Um, but I mean, yeah, without Cameron Munster, we can easily tell how different of a side they were. So, but I'm still worried about them in the forward pack. I really am. Like, yeah, but having Munster back will definitely lift them up. And yeah, this is definitely going to be a game that the Storm are viewing as a must win because right now they're sitting in 13th spot, which is not a spot we normally see with Melbourne. Um, but yeah, I think they can turn this around pretty quickly, considering now that Munster's back. Okay, now we have the Tigers. So Tigers, they're outsiders obviously, but I thought they showed some good fight at the end of last week. When they scored 3 tries in 5 minutes, they showed that they are a good attacking team, but they still, for the majority of the game last week, they still didn't know how they still don't know how they want to attack, and that's the Tigers' biggest problem at the moment, as well as their defense, obviously, because defensively they've leaked too many points. But they're a side that can score points quickly. They showed that last week. So they are definitely threatening. Like their forwards are outstanding. Like that's the thing with the Tigers. Their forwards are very good. They can get them to their 20 so easily or inside the other opponent's red zone, their own 20. But in that 20, they can't seem to do it. They just can't seem to execute and can't seem to get over the line. Um, and yeah, personally, I'm just still not a big fan of their outside backs. I really am not. Um, but yeah, let's have a look at their team. So Adam Dewey is now at fullback. I mean, he was at the end there, in fullback there at the end of last week when they started to score some points, but I don't think that was the reason. As I said last week, I think the reason they started to look better is once Brendan Wakeham came on, he seemed to energize them. And he made them play a bit more direct and actually went straight forward, not going laterally like they have been the first two and a half weeks, let's say. But yeah, Adam Do at the back, that's a bit interesting. I think he's their best player, but yeah. And yeah, Charlie Staines on the wing there with Junior Tupou and Brent Naden and Asu Kapoa in the centers. And they've brought Brendan Wakeham into the 5'8". That's actually a pretty good move because he was very good for them there when he came on last week. He was very good for them. And Luke Brooks is still there in the halfback role. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the Tigers outside backs just don't look that threatening enough. Apart from maybe Charlie Staines and maybe Asu Kapoa, they're the only two I look at and look that, or they might threaten here. But the other two are just not. They kind of like just do the job players. They don't really seem that threatening, really. But yeah, that's I think the Tigers' biggest problem at the moment is their attack, and they just don't really know what they're doing in attack yet. But last week they showed some good signs at the end of the game. So if they keep attacking the way they did at the end of last week's game, then they are a big chance of beating this Melbourne side, who are still well, they are still a tiny bit vulnerable, but not really now because Munster's back. Um, but yeah, we'll see how they go. In the front row, they have Stefano Tukamanu and David Clemmer, two of the people who I believe turned the momentum their way once they came back on in that second half. Um, they've been very good. As I said, the Tigers forward pack's very good. It's just their backline, which I just can't seem to convert their chances into points at the moment. Apisai Coruscant is still at dummy half there. He needs to get a little bit better, but that's going to come with time. He's still adjusting to their stuff, their systems. And then they've got their Papali'i, who's come back into the squad, as well with John Bateman, who I thought was pretty disappointing last week, but hopefully he'll get better this week for them. But yeah, I thought he was pretty disappointing last week, but maybe it's going to take him a bit of time to get back into the swing of things. But yeah, he was a bit disappointing for me. Um, and then at lock, they've got Fanua Polo, who I thought he did pretty a decent job there when he came on. And on the bench, oh, it's an interesting looking bench. So they've got Dane Laurie on the bench. Okay, that's very interesting. Then they've got Alex Twal, Sean Blore, and Alex Seyfarth on the bench as well. And their replacement is Stafford Toa, and Joe Offengowi's out as well with David Nofaluma. Um, okay, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, interesting. Um, I think that bench, I mean, it's a decent enough of a bench. I think it's slightly better than Melbourne's bench because they've got Tyron Wishart, who looks like a number 14. He's number 14. He's been there the last few weeks for Munster. Alec McDonald, Bronson Garlick aren't necessarily that great. Tarek Sims is probably their biggest player on the bench. But for me, I think the Tigers bench is a bit stronger than the Melbourne Storm bench. But in terms of the starting 13, I think Melbourne's is stronger um, by a bit. Um, like just compare these backlines. They've got Justin Olam, Xavier Coates, Will Warbrick, Nick Meaney compared to Adam Dewey, Charlie Staines, Naden Capoe, and Tupou. Like there's only one winner in that backline, and that's Melbourne. So um yeah, I mean Tigers again, yeah, their biggest problem has just been their attack constantly going sideways. Their defense has been pretty ordinary at times too. They did show some good resilience at the end of last week's game in scoring those quick tries. So they will be on a high from last week. But I don't know. I'm just going to think that the Storm will be a little bit too strong now with Cameron Munster coming back. I think he's going to get them the win. And I think with having him back, the Melbourne team's going to play a lot better than they have the last 2 weeks. So I'm going to go the Storm, and I'm going to go they'll win by, I think they'll win by 8 points. I think it's going to be a pretty close game than most people would anticipate because I think the Tigers will definitely be up for this game, and they will definitely be fired up. And I think I think there might be quite a bit of points in this game. This could be like the Titans Storm game last week. There could be a lot, not saying error wise, but as in point scoring wise, there could be quite a lot of points scored in this game. Um, but I'm going to say it's going to be close. Actually, I changed it a little bit. I'll say Melbourne Storm by 10. I think they'll get the job done. Yeah, I just think the Tigers, personally, I just still think their outside backs aren't quite strong enough yet compared to the Melbourne outside backs. So that's why I'm going Melbourne. Um, and yeah, I don't see Melbourne losing three in a row, especially now with Munster coming back. So yeah, Melbourne 1-12, or because this is the margin game, I put Melbourne win by 10. Um, yeah. Now, on to the most anticipated game of the round, the Battle of Brisbane, as they're putting it. The Dolphins taking on the Broncos up there at Sun. Yeah, so it is a Dolphins home game here at Suncorp. So that's going to be very interesting to see how the Broncos take that. Um, I mean, I saw some of their celebrations as their tries last week at the end of the game there with Reece Walsh and Matt Ram. And they were saying that those celebrations were saying that Suncorp is our home. So interesting to see how they take this. But yeah, this is going to be an absolute cracker of a game. I can't wait to see this game. Um, yeah, Dolphins, I mean, they've been the absolute standouts of the comp thus far. Obviously, as their first season, they've won every single game. They've been absolutely outstanding. Um, and yeah, I'm just still absolutely amazed how great they've gone. Like I knew at the start of the year they were going to be competitive, but I did not think they were going to be this competitive and be on the top of the near tight at the top of the ladder with their rivals, the Broncos. But yeah, this is going to be an absolute cracker of a game. Um, got a lot of narratives in this game, like Bennett up against his old side, another Brisbane team that he's coaching, but it's not the Broncos. And it's such a great battle to watch on and off the field between the coaches and obviously on the players to see how they go and see all the mind games during the week between Wayne Bennett and the Broncos. So yeah, let's have a look at this game. So we got for the Dolphins, so the Hammers at the back there. He's been outstanding for them. Big part of why they're doing so well. Jermaine Sarko, Tessie New, the two ex-Broncos players on the wings there. They've done pretty well too, them too. Um, got Ewan Aitken and Branko Lee in the centers. Isaiah Katot and Sean O'Sullivan in the halves. So an unchanged back line there for the Dolphins. Front um, in the middle, they've got Jesse Bromwich and Kenny Bromwich there, and they've got Cody Nikorima at dummy half, and they've got Felice Kafusi and Konali Lamelu in the second row. That's interesting to see him named because I did read this morning that I'm pretty sure he's been banned. So I think this is because I think that only just came out this morning, and team lists are named on Tuesday. So I'm pretty sure Felice Kafusi will be replaced by someone else because yeah, I'm pretty sure he's not going to be in this for this week because he obviously got that three to 4 game suspension after his late shot on Jackson Hastings. So that's a big out for the Dolphins. He's been their best player thus far this season. He's been a great leader for them. And I think again, Melbourne letting him go is the biggest regret. Like, look at how Melbourne have struggled this year in leadership without Munster and like guys like Kenny Bromwich and Jesse Bromwich. Melbourne, I still am dumbfounded by Melbourne and let them go. I really am. But yeah, them three have been amazing for the Dolphins and the biggest reason for their success thus far because they know what success looks like and they brought it to the Dolphins, as well as Wayne Bennett, who's, I mean, he'll probably go down as the best coach of all time. Um, and then yeah, so they've got Tommy Gilbert as lock as well, so that rounds out their 13. I mean, that's a pretty solid 13. The only challenger with Felice Kafusi, but who replaces him, I'm not too sure. And their bench is Jared Wallace, Mark Nichols, Ray Stone, and Mason Teague. And their replacement player is Puasa Farmasili. Um, so yeah, I think more than likely, I would say Ray Stone or maybe Pasa Farmasili will probably replace Felice Kafusi. But yeah, I mean that's a pretty stock standard Dolphins team. Um, I know on paper they don't necessarily have the best team of all, like don't have a lot of star players, but they just play really tough, basic, simple football, and it's just showing very effective because they complete very high. They don't make too many errors. They don't give away too many stupid penalties. They're very good defensively. Um, and in attacking wise, they do have some spark with the hammer. Jermaine Asako and Tessie New have been great. Katoa is a very live wire player, and O'Sullivan's just that steady head that just leads them around. And their forward pack is very solid. And they don't do too much wrong. So that's why Dolphins have been so good. Um, and again, I would not be surprised if they surprised the Broncos this week. I really wouldn't be. But again, that's going to come down to the mind games between the coaches this week to see which coach is going to get in whose head. Yeah, I'm so keen to watch this game. I really am. Now on to the Broncos. So they've got Reece Walsh at the back there, Jesse Arthurs and so on Cobbo on the wing still. Katoni Staggs and Herbie Farnworth in the centers. Got Ezra Mam and Adam Reynolds in the halves there. Tommy Flegler and Payne Haas in the front row. So Tommy Flegler's into the starting side there. Billy Walters is still at the dummy half. Kurt Capewell and Jordan Ricky in the second row. And they've got Paddy Carrigan at lock. On the bench, they've got Corey Pakes, Keenan Palacia, Corey Jensen, and Martin Tapau. And the replacement player is Dean Mariner. So yeah, I mean, very unchanged Broncos lineup there, same as last week. Yeah, I mean, they were outstanding last week at that last 10 minutes, but apart from that, they were shown to be a team that can be cracked. Like in the middle, they really did struggle against the Dragons, who the Dragons pack took it straight to them. And I believe this Dolphins pack will definitely take it to the Broncos. I really do. Um, but yeah, I mean, looking at these teams, like the Broncos, like they just have way too much firepower. Like Ezra Mam, Cobbo, their centers in Staggs and Farnworth, Reese Walsh, Payne Haas, Tommy Flegler, Pat Carrigan, and they've still got Martin Tapau and guys like that on the bench. Like this Broncos team is basically too big to lose, but we all know how good at Wayne Bennett is at getting his teams up for these kind of rivalry games, and he'd be telling his players like how no one's probably giving him a chance. Um, and it would not surprise me if the Dolphins surprise the Broncos and beat them on their own home ground. Although it's kind of shared this year. Um, yeah, I'm just so keen to watch this game. In terms of my prediction, it's very tough to it's very tough to call. It is very tough. Um, yeah, I mean, again, it would not surprise me if the Dolphins win. Um, but I think the Broncos are just a little bit too strong. I think they're just a little bit too strong. I'm going to go Broncos 1-12. I think this is going to be really close. Um, yeah, but I mean, with Felice Kafusi out, he's a massive out. Um, but it'll be just next man up mentality for the Dolphins. I'm very sure it will be. They'll still be a very tough side to beat. But again, this is a game I can definitely see the Broncos losing. This is a game where I can see the Broncos going in too cocky, too confident, and they underestimate the Dolphins and they come in and get flogged or get beaten by the Dolphins. Um, but yeah, I'm just going to go Broncos. I think they'll be just a little bit too strong. I think they'll get the job done 1-12. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how this week plays out between these two teams' coaches. Um, and see which coach is going to get into their head. But again, the Dolphins can very easily win this game. They really can. But I'm going to go Broncos 1-12. I think it's going to be very close. Uh, yeah. Okay, now onto my boys, my team, the Gold Coast Titans taking on the Cowboys up there in Queensland Country Bank Stadium, so up there in Townsville. I mean, yeah, very very great to see us last week. But first, I'll go into the Cowboys. So, yeah, I mean the Cowboys have been pretty disappointing this year, thus far. They haven't really done that well thus far this year. They've shown some signs. Like they started in round one against the Raiders. They started very well. They were 18-0, and then all of a sudden, yeah, they're just up 18-0, and then all of a sudden, the um the Raiders just came back, and it was only a field goal that won them the game. So even in round one, they didn't play necessarily that great. They got away with it. But yeah, the last 2 weeks against the Broncos, they were pretty average. Um, they just made too many errors, and the defense was pretty poor. I mean, in the first half against the Broncos, they showed some good signs defensively, but in the second half, they just lost it. They just could not defend for their lives. Um, and last week against the Warriors, they just got outgunned in the middle. So they really do need to step up in the middle this week if they are to have any chance of beating us. Um, that's also concerned getting onto us. Like our middles this year have been absolutely outstanding. I mean, Tino's obviously been great, like he always is. He's probably our most consistent player week in, week out. I thought Mo Fotuaika and guys like that have been insane. Um, yeah, and then our second rows like Dave Feeder, Joe Stimson, who Joe Stimson doesn't get mentioned much, but covering for a guy like Bo Firma, who was easily our best player on the field last year, he has done massive. He's been absolutely outstanding in that role there and covering in for Bo Firma, who's unfortunately out with the ACL for the year. And yeah, obviously with our players going down, which I know not many teams are talking about. Even last week, everyone was talking about how Melbourne's injuries are the reasons why they lost. Like we had just as many injuries as they did, especially in the similar key positions. Like Sammy Verrills was out, and he's our starting number 9. Jojo Fida, who's our starting winger, was out. Jimmy Jolliffe, who's our starting front row, was also out. Um, so yeah, like it's not that Melbourne were the only team last week to have injuries. We had injuries as well. And Melbourne last week also did have quite a few of their big players returning, like Justin Olam, Xavier Coates, Tui Kamakamiko, guys like that. So yeah, I mean, I think it just showed that we were just a little bit more desperate last week, and we wanted to get the win more than Melbourne did. Especially our first game at home last week. It was outstanding to watch. I love that. Love to see that, especially to fight through um, all the adversity we had last week, which in the past we haven't necessarily done well with. But I was very impressed to see how we fought through that adversity last week, and I think it will continue. But let's have a look at the teams here. So Cowboys are relatively unchanged. Tom Chester's still at the back there. Kyle Felt, Maritalangi on the wings. Valentine Holmes, Gamat Shibasaki in the centers. Tommy Did and Chad Townsend in the halves there. Jordan McLean, Reese Robson, and Griffin Neem round out the front row. Um, so obviously Griffin Neem is replacing Ruben Cotter. Ruben Cotter is a massive out. Um, he is probably their best forward to start this year, I'd say. He's been very good for them. Um, but yeah, that he's going to be quite a big out actually. And obviously Scott Drinkwater, who would normally be at fullback, and Peter Hiku, they're still out from their suspensions, but they'll be back next week. Um, in the second row, they have Cohen Hess and Jeremiah Nanai. Jeremiah Nanai is continuing his great form from last year. He's a very good little player there. And they've got Jason Tamala at lock. On the bench, they've got Jake Granville, Helam Lukey, Jermaine Tanua Brown, and James Tamo. And their replacement player is Brandon Elliott. So, yeah, Ruben Cotter's the only out there for them. But yeah, I mean, yeah, Cowboys were very disappointing last week. Obviously, they'd want to turn around this week. But yeah, I mean, I think their defense just hasn't been good enough to start this year, and they've just leaked too many points, and they're just focusing too much on their attack. They're going back to the old Titans model at the moment, is what it looks like. Um, in terms of they're just trying to outscore teams at the moment, and they're not necessarily trying to defend as well as they should. Um, but yeah, it should be a very interesting clash up there. Now to my team. So we have the same team that won last week. So Brimson at the back, Khan Pereira, the absolute machine on the wing there with Philip Sammy, who also did a very good job last week. Brian Kelly and Aaron Shop still in the centers. Very good center pairing there for us. Halves are the same, Kieran Foran and Tanner Boyd. Um, Relatively similar halves pairing to the Cowboys, like Tommy Did and Tanner Boyd are the two inexperienced gun little halves there. And then they've got Chatty Townsend and Kieran Foran, who are the two experienced and more um, stalwarts of the halves there. In the forwards, we have Moeki Fotuaika and Tino Fasamalawi, the captain, in the front row there. And then Chrissy Randall is starting dummy half, same as he was last week for the injured Sammy Verrills. You got Dave Fafita and Joe Stimson in the second row, and Isaac Lee lock to round out the 13. And our bench is JC, Jaden Campbell, Joe Vuna, Aaron Clark, and Isaac Vassal Malawi. And our replacement player is Cleese Haas. I mean, I'm very happy with this squad. It's a strong looking bench. Aaron Clark, Joe Vuna, and Isaac Vassal Malawi, who made his debut last week. He was exceptional last week. The way he came on and he just absolutely did his job. He just absolutely took it to Melbourne. I was very happy to see Joe Vuna. Great to see him back after the 644-day hiatus he had and he wasn't able to play. Got to meet Pye in his first ever game, which was great to see. Aaron Clark, I thought, has been very good for us to start the year. JC, he's sort of had a little bit of limited game time thus far this year, but when he's on, he's been very threatening as always. He's a very threatening player. Yeah, I mean, our forward pack has been very good so far this year. So I think our forward pack can definitely take it to these Cowboys pack. That's the battle I'm most intrigued looking forward to, the battle between our pack and their pack. Because we're sort of very similar packs in terms of that. Obviously, the Cowboys, I think, is a little bit bigger of a pack, but I think ours is more of a more skillful pack. And yeah, obviously, Chris Randall, I mean, he did a good job last week to fill in. And the effort he did was outstanding last week. Obviously, for the injured Sammy Verrills, who had surgery on Monday. Apparently, he's going really well on his after his surgery. But I'm not exactly quite sure yet when he's going to be back. But I think he's going to be out for quite a while. Also, Jamin Jolliffe is going well after his surgery. He's progressing pretty well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm very happy with this squad. Obviously, Tanner, he did a good job last week after all the crap he got from the Dragons game, where his kicking was a bit off, where he couldn't find touch a few times. But last week, he was very good. Um, Kieran Foran there. Yeah, he's been very good for us too. Aaron Shop last week, he was outstanding. Brian Kelly was very good for us coming back there. Lofiana Campera, like he's just a very good player. I would not be surprised. I'm making a bold prediction now. I would not be surprised if he wins Rookie of the Year for us. I really would not be. Um, and yeah, obviously AJ Brimson just does what AJ Brimson does. He's very good at the back there, always is. He was very good on the weekend, and yeah, he's just a very solid player. He doesn't do too much wrong. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just very happy with us this year and how we've played this year. I was expecting these odds to be a bit closer, considering we beat the Storm last week, whereas the Cowboys lost at home to the Warriors. But yeah, I mean, it is going to be a tough game up there at Queensland Country Bank Stadium. Like we haven't won up there for a while. Um, but I am going to back my team as always. I'm a Titans fan, so I'm going to back my own team. I really do think we can get the job done here. I think 1-12. I think we're just going to be too much on a confidence high after coming off and beating Melbourne, which we haven't done that for 10 years at home. So I think the boys will just still be very much high and buzzing from that. Whereas the Cowboys have been pretty disappointing. Yes, they're going to be definitely up for this game. They're going to be definitely more hard to beat than they were last week. But I still just think we're going to be a little bit too strong for them. I think our forward pack's just been too strong to start this year, and I think they'll only keep getting better. Um, and I think our backline's been a lot more informed than the Cowboys' backline has. So I'm going to tip my boys, and I think we'll get the job done 1-12. So let's go Titans. I really do think we'll get the job done there. But it is going to be tough going up there, obviously. But I think we can get the job done. Next game, we have the South Sydney Rabbitohs taking on the Manly Sea Eagles. This is actually going to be a pretty good game too. After coming off the round, I mean, Rabbitohs were a bit unlucky on the weekend not to beat the Roosters, and Manly had that high scoring backwards forwards game against the Parramatta Eels. Yeah, this is going to be a crack of a game. So this is South's home game. It's going to be played at a core stadium there in Sydney. Yes, let's have a look at the sides here. So we've got Latrell at the back, Alex Johnston and Isaac Tuitupo Thompson, Isaiah Tass and Campbell Graham in the centres, Cody Walker and Lachlan Ilias as the halves there, Daniel Saluka Fafita and Tom Burgess are in the front row there. So Daniel Saluka Fafita is into the squad there to replace Tavita Totola. So Tavita Totola, Hame Sele, and Shakai Mitchell are out for the Rabbitohs this week. So those are some big outs actually. And they've got Damien Cook there as the dummy half, and they've got Keon Kolomatangi and Jacob Host in the second row. Interesting to see that there. And they've got Karen Murray at lock as always. Their bench is Blake Taff, Michael Cheekham, Davey Moale, and Jed Cartwright. And their replacement player is Ben Lovett. Yeah, I mean, South last week, I thought they were pretty good for like the first 20 or 30 minutes until the Roosters forwards just came on and absolutely tore them open. But apart from that, I thought they were pretty average last week for a majority of the game. I mean, Latrell showed some good signs. He was okay. Alex Johnston was very good for them. I mean, they did bomb quite a few tries, as in Roosters saved quite a few tries from them. So it could have been a very different result last week. But with the poor news, which I'll get onto in a second, so obviously with the passing of John Sattler this week, who's a Rabbitohs legend, they're going to obviously dedicate this week to him. So they're going to absolutely be on fire and wanting to get this win for him. Who unfortunately John Sattler died a few days ago. yeah, he was an absolute legend of the game. Sad to see him pass. I don't know too much of him because obviously I was not born when he was playing, but I've heard some of the stories and seen some of the stuff that he played through, like that broken jaw in that 1970 grand final against Manly, which this game's against, was absolutely outstanding. The way he played through that, he was the toughest man I've, as I've heard, and I could see he definitely was a very tough player. And yeah, I just think the Rabbitohs will definitely play the absolute best this week just to get the job done for him and to repay him and to farewell him. But yeah, I think the Rabbitohs will get back to the way they've been. They had a few hiccups last week, but I think they will be back to their best. Um, and yeah, Manly, they're unchanged from last week. So Tommy Turbo's still at the back there. Christian Tuipulotu and Ruben Garrick on the wings. Brad Parker and Tolatau Kola in the centers, and Josh Schuster and Daly Cherry Evans in the halves there. Josh Schuster was brilliant last week. The only thing is, can he back it up this week? I'm not sure, but if he does, Manly have a good chance of winning. Um, their front row there, Tanya Paseka and Jack Chaboyevich, and Lachlan Croker, the dummy half there. Second row, they've got Hamole Olakuatu, Kelma Tuolangi, and Josh Aloye. And their bench is Ko Weeks, Ben Chaboyevich, Ethan Bullymore, and Sean Kepi. And Tafofa Sipley is the replacement there. I mean, again, very strong Manly side. Their pack has been pretty good the last few weeks. I mean, South pack is a little bit weakened this week with Shakai Mitchell and Tavita Tola being out there, and obviously Jaime Sele as well. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very tough game to call this one because this really could go either way because Manly were very good last week in attack, but obviously defensively they were very poor. So South will definitely want to expose that. Um, and yeah, I think South just have a little bit too much firepower, and I think they've got too much motivation coming into this game, obviously to repay their fans for last week. Obviously, they're at home again this week at a core stadium, and to obviously um, farewell their legend of their club, John Sattler. So I think the Rabbitohs just have a little bit too much motivation to win this game, and I think they'll be a little bit too strong for Manly. Um, but it's going to be a very close game, and I can definitely see Manly winning this game. I really could. Um, but yeah, I think Manly. I think their defense last week just wasn't quite there, and I still think Josh Schuster is quite weak defensively, so he will definitely be targeted in this game without question. So it's going to be very interesting to see how he goes defensively this week. But if he plays like he played last week, Manly can definitely win this game. But due to all the factors I mentioned before, I'm going to go the Rabbitohs. I'm going to go Rabbitohs 1-12. I think it's going to be, again, a really close game. Just in general, this season has been very close. It was announced the other day, or confirmed by the NRL. This is the closest season the NRL has had since 1975. So it's an outstanding season thus far, and I can't wait to see the rest of it unfold. Now, on to the next game here. We have the first Sunday game of the round. We have the Warriors taking the Bulldogs over there in New Zealand. I mean, the Warriors have been absolutely outstanding. This is a tough game to predict by the pundits. Very close game they're calling. I think it very well will be. So let's have a look at the squads here. So they've got Charles Nickel Klokstad. So he's back for the Warriors. That's a massive back for them. He's back after his injury a couple of weeks ago, or the concussion protocol, where against the Roosters there. We had Edward Cossey and Viliami Valea in the centers, and Viliami Valea and Adam Pompey in the centers. Edward Cossey, Marcelo Montoya on the wings. Marcelo Montoya has been really good for the Warriors thus far this year. They have Tamari Martin and Sean Johnson in the halves there. Again, Tamari Martin has been very good for the Warriors to start this year. And yeah, Sean Johnson has been very good too. In the front row here, we have Adam Fanua Blake and Bunty Afoa. They've been very good to start the year. and Freddie Lussick is going to start for the Warriors with Wade Egan being out. Interesting to see how he goes. I think he's going to be a very good player for them. He provided some definite spark. Yeah, interesting to see how he goes. They've got Jackson Ford, who's come back into the squad to replace the injured Mitch Barnett, um, as well with Murata Nikora in the second row there. And they've got Tohu Harris at lock there. So who's their captain? Doesn't say their captain is, but I'm pretty sure Tohu Harris would be. And on the bench, they've got Dylan Walker, Bailey Sirinen, Jazz Tavanga, and Tom Arley, and Josh Curran is their replacement player. I mean, yeah, it's a very, very strong Warriors team. Wade Egan, who's been on fire to start this year for the Warriors, he's out, so he's been replaced by Freddie Lossick. And yeah, Mitch Barnett has been replaced by Jackson Ford, who started the year very well for them too. So I don't think they missed too much there. And yeah, CNK being back for the Warriors at the back there, he's massive. With him in the side, they look a lot better. And just in general this year, the Warriors have been so much improved. They've been a very good team to watch thus far. They've been a lot more resilient than in the past. Defensively, they've been a lot better. And in attack, they are actually looking a lot better than they have been in the past. So, good sight to see there for the Warriors fans, and good to see in general the Warriors having a bit of success there. Um, Now to the doggies. Obviously, they got the job done last week, although in a scare at the end there against the Tigers. They were the better team in that game on the weekend and definitely deserved to win, but they had a bit of a scare there late at the end of the game. But yeah, they've been looking pretty good so far to start this year. But yeah, here's their squad for this week. So they've got Hayes Perham at the back there, Jake Kraz and Addo Carr on the wings, Jake Gabriel and Paul Alamotti, the absolute beast he is there at centre. He's been probably the not Tigers, the Bulldogs' best player to start this year. He's been outstanding. And they've got Matt Burton and Kyle Fang in halves. Matt Burton's the captain there. In the forwards, they've got Max King and Ryan Sutton in the front row there, and they've got Reed Marnie as the dummy half there. He's been very good for them to start this year too. And they've got Viliami Kikau and Jacob Preston in the back row there, and Jacob Preston's been very good to start this year. He's been quite impressive. Just the way his running game is, his defense is pretty solid. He doesn't make too many errors. He's just a very solid young little player there. So good to see him having a bit of success there and see how he goes for the rest of the year. And then at lock, they have Raymond Fatala Mariner there to round out the 13. And their bench is Jaden Ockenbaugh, Corey Waddell, Jaden Tanner, and Famanu Brown. And Braden Burns is their replacement. So that's the Bulldogs squad there. So unchanged from last week. Again, they've just been very good the last 2 weeks. Obviously, it's a lot of hype now from the Bulldogs fans, which I can understand. But yeah, I don't know. It's going to be a very tough game for them traveling to New Zealand. Yeah, taking on a informed Warriors squad who they have a few outs themselves in Mitch Barnett and Wade Egan, probably Wade Egan being their informed player to start this year. But yeah, I think it's going to be a very tough game. I think the Warriors, again, at home, they're a different squad. They just seem to play really well at home. And I think they will get the job done at home. I think they're just going to be a little bit too strong there. I think this is going to be an extremely close game, 1-12 for the Warriors. I think their forward pack has been too strong. I think they will just roll over the Bulldogs pack, which again, that's what happened to them in the first game against Manly. The Warriors pack, the Manly pack just overran the Doggies in that first week, and they really struggled. Even last week, once David Clemmer and Stefano Tukumanu actually took it to them, they really struggled. The Doggies middles. So yeah, I think the Warriors at home just are too strong of an outfit, and I'll go 1-12. CNK also coming back, he'll spark them, no doubt. And I think their boards are just too strong at the moment and just in too good of a form at the moment. So I'm going to go Warriors 1-12 there. On to the next game. On the Sunday, we have the Knights taking on the Raiders down there at McDonald Jones Stadium. Again, a few more outs this week for the Knights, so even more outs. So Dominic Young, Oren Kelly, and Ryan Rivett are out. And we'll have a look at their squad. So Lockie Miller's at the back there. Heimel Hunt on the wings with Greg Marju. Um, the ex-Titans player who finally gets his chance to debut. He's an absolute powerhouse. So I think he's going to be massive for the Knights coming out of trouble. Again, like as always, it's just going to be his defense. That's the main concern there. In the centers, Dane Gagai and Bradman Best. Their halves are Tyson Gamble and Jackson Hastings. In the forwards here, they have Daniel Saifidi in the front row with Leo Thompson, who I thought Leo Thompson has been decent the last few weeks. And they have Jaden Brayley, who's back into the squad. He's a skipper. Good to see him back. They've missed him last week. Definitely around that middle, they really missed him. And just in attack in general, they really missed him. In the back row there, they've got Lachlan Fitzgibbon and Brody Jones. And their lock is Kurt Mann. And their bench is Phoenix Crossland, Jack Hetherington, Matt Croker, and Jack Johns. And their reserve player is Dylan Lucas. I mean, it's still kind of a weakened Knights team there. Their forward pack still does look quite a bit weak. They are at home. They did play decently at home last week, but again, the Dolphins were just too good for them, and they just made too many errors and gave away too many penalties last week, and they really seem to struggle without their players like Kalen Ponga and stuff like that. They really seem to struggle. But they do have some guys coming back. Tyson Frizzell also been named to come in, but he's on the extended bench. But yeah, this should be an interesting game for the Raiders and for the Knights. But I think the Knights, they've just really struggled so far this year because they haven't had consistent team. Obviously, suspensions and injuries hasn't helped them. But just in attack in general, they don't look that. I don't know. They look okay at patches. They look really good. Lachlan Miller, I think he's been easily their best player to start the year. He's been outstanding. But apart from him in attack, they really seem to struggle. They just kind of rely on him a little bit too much at the moment. And their forward pack, as I said, is really weakened. So that's why they're struggling so far to start this year. Now, onto the Raiders. Sebastian Chris there at the back. James Schiller back in the squad here with Albert Hopewade, who got to meet Pye last week against the Sharkies there for their first win of the season. And Matthew Timoko and Harley Smith Shields in the centers there. Jack White and Jamal Fogarty in the halves. Josh Papali'i is finally back into the squad here for the Raiders. He's a massive in. He's definitely going to bolster their forward pack, who I thought their forward pack was really good last week. Zach Wolford there, the dummy half, replacing the injured Danny Levi. Joseph Tarpany joins him as well in the front row there. Second row, they've got Hudson Young and Elliot Whitehead, and their lock is Corey Harrier and Naira, and their bench is Tom Starling, Pasami Solo, Corey Horsburgh, the absolute beast from last week, got a double for the Raiders, pretty much got him the win last week. And Emre Gula round out the bench, and Matt Frawley is the replacement player. That's a very strong Raiders team. Their forward pack has been bolstered even more. I think the Raiders have finally found their groove to win last week, and their defense looked a lot better. I think I'm still not quite sure about Sebastian Chris at fullback, but the rest of their side looks pretty solid. Their forward pack looks really strong, and that's why I'm going to tip him here. I think I'm going to go Raiders, and I think I'm going to go 13 plus. I think the Raiders are just going to be too strong. They got a win last week, and the Knights have really struggled the last few weeks. So, and with even more outs this week, I think they're just going to struggle even more. I just don't see them winning this game. But it'll probably be close for the majority of the game, but the Raiders just run away with it. So I'm going to go Raiders 13 plus there. Now, onto the last game of the week here. The Dragons taking on the Cronulla Sharks, both sides who lost last week, although in different fashions. So obviously the Dragons last week lost to the Broncos 40-18, although they were in the game for the majority of the game last week. It was just that last 10 minutes where the Broncos just ran away with it. Um, that was the difference. Whereas Cronulla, they just basically didn't really give themselves a chance last week with constant errors and penalties um, and just lack of direction. Although they've got a massive in this week, who I'll get to in a second. But yeah, it's going to be a big game too, considering this is also another rivalry. But yeah, let's have a look through the squads here. So for the Dragons, they're unchanged from last week, I'm pretty sure. So you got Tyrone Sloan there at the back, Matt Fierney and Michaela Ravalawa on the wings, Zach Lomax and Moses Sully in the centres. They've got Jaden Sullivan and Ben Hunt in the halves. Francis Molo and Blake Laurie in the front row there, with Moses Emby at dummy half. Still not sure about him at dummy half there. And they've got Ben Murdoch Masilla and Jaden Stewart in the second row there. Jack Bird still at lock. And the bench is Jacob Little, Zane Musgrove, Toby Couchman, and Josh Kerr. And their reserve is Michael Molo. Yeah, I mean, there's even more bad news coming out of the Dragons. So there's news that came out this morning that Anthony Griffin has been given the rest of this year to prove if he will be able to coach next year or not. So he's basically being told that if you don't win enough games this year, then you will be sacked and you will not be our coach for next year. They've already looked at three candidates, being Ben Horsby. Who else was there? There was Jason Riles and I can't remember the other player who they were looking at, but all three of their ex-coaches were all of their three candidates are ex Dragons players, so that could help them maybe find back their identity, which they've struggled for a long time now, for the past 10 years. Well, they don't want to admit it, but they really have. To at least be in the top 8 there and win a title. Anyway, but they have always been around that top 10 or so. Just yeah, I don't know how it happens every year, but they just always seem to be somehow up there, no matter what we think of them. But yeah, I thought they were okay, pretty good last week, but it's just again the last 10 minutes where they got killed. So I think they would still have some confidence coming out of that game where they stuck it to the Broncos for the majority of that game. But yeah, now to the Sharkies. So lineup here, they have William Kennedy at the back there. He's been very good to start the year for them. Even last week is very good. Sione Qatar and Ronaldo Mulatalo. I'd argue probably the best wing pairing of the comp. And Jesse Ramian, Zia for Talakai there in the centres. And the halves there, be the big in. Nico Hines is back into the squad there with Matty Moylan. Nico Hines is an absolute massive back in for them. That's been the biggest problem, even last week and in their first couple of weeks. Is just they've just lacked direction, and yeah, they've just missed Nico Hines very dearly. So it's good to see him back there for the Sharks, and I think they'll be a lot better team with him back in there. But yeah, he's going to be a massive back in. He's going to have the same like sort of Karen Munster type impact for the Sharks there, for their squads. In the front row here, they've got Toby Rudolph and Braden Hamlin-Uele, who I thought was excellent in that second half when he came on last week. He was trying to bring the game back towards the Sharks there when they had that little sin bin period. And Blake Brayley's there at dummy half. And their second row is Brenton Nakora and Teague Wilton. Probably two of their better players to start the year. Brenton Nakora is still absolutely gun amazing player. Even last week, he was very exceptional for them. And then lock is Dale Finucane, and he's their captain as well. Their bench is Cam McInnes, Royce Hunt, Oregon Kafusi, and Braden Trindle. So he's still, as I've been saying the last few weeks, I've been saying it quite often. Braden Trindle is still a good little player. So he's still in their 17, which is good news for him. And their replacement player is Jack Williams. So again, very strong Sharks team here now. It's pretty much full strength. It's a very good looking squad. And yeah, I think this is going to be a game where they'll show, or Nico Hines will show his class and show how much he means to this team and how good he is for this team. And for the Dragons, I mean, they were good last week, but I think the Sharks will just get the job done this game. I think the Sharks will get the job done 1-12 because this is a rivalry game, so the Dragons will be up for this game. But I think the Sharks will just be a little bit too strong with Nico Hines coming back in. So yeah, I think Sharks just a bit too strong there. But again, Dragons could easily do what they did last week and surprise all of us and stick it to the Broncos or the Sharks for that matter. Um, Majority of the game there. So yeah, so that's all my predictions and tips for this week. Make sure to leave a comment down below of your predictions and what you think's gonna happen this week. Um, and yeah, thank you guys for watching. Again, make sure to like and subscribe because I want to try to reach 50 subscribers by the end of the month. That would be insane if I could. Um, and if I don't, I'm very glad with as many subscribers as I have. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Up at the Titans, and I'll see you in my next video.